thing. Like, was it? It's like Augustine, where he's like, "Forgive me, Lord, for I still do not understand what time is, no matter how hard I try." And it's like it's in his confessions where he's like begging for forgiveness, like asking for mercy because he doesn't understand what time is.
I guess I sympathize with Augustine. I still don't. I still don't. I mean, like, especially when I read about like the Bergson Einstein debates, and Bergson says something like, "I'm not concerned with clock time," and I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like, Einstein was apparently a mega douche to Bergson about a lot of these types of things.
Einstein is an absolute. I never realized Einstein is a bastard. So, my man, what is it that we are doing here? Because I've never done this. So, what's going on?
Before we started, I actually wanted to have a conversation with you briefly about veganism.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, one second.
But very briefly, and I will not be able to articulate all these points because I was just in a conversation with one of my friends in TPC, and he was arguing on behalf of this point. And I think it's a legitimate concern, and I want to be able to answer it without appealing to deontological ethics, because I think deontological ethics kind of missed the point to what he was sort of concerned about. But anyways, when you have whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'll do my best.
The TLDR, this is basically that without vivisections on rats that are sort of genetically modified and, within sort of lab experiments, the sort of the status of medicine right now would basically come to an end with respect to a lot of things. And although it would be great to be able to stop these types of things, and he obviously sees that we should obviously try to treat rats as means instead of means to an ends, it would still cause a lot of, medical stir if we suddenly do this. And it's a sort of repugnant conclusion that we're forced to adapt. So,
well, I guess I'm thinking, first thing I would challenge that is empirically. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want to know why he thinks that medicine itself would come to an end, because I think that there are quite a few, not just philosophers, but like biologists and, medical practitioners who challenge that. There's actually a specific charity based around testing medicines in the first place without animal testing. And animal testing as well, in many cases, can be detrimental to actually instantiating, thank you very much, instantiating whether something is safe for a human because of the biological differences between animals and humans. We've been misled. A great example is thamilamide. Thamilamide was said to be safe because it was tested on animals, in particular pregnant animals, and it didn't cause any birth defects. But then when it was tested upon humans, well, not tested upon humans, when we actually made it available to humans, it created horrible outcomes compared to that which was seen in animals, which was nearly no issue. And so people were born with severe birth defects. So I think there's an empirical issue that needs to be resolved before we accept that it would. But we'll grant that, I think, for the rest, for the next part of the discussion.
Yeah, you'll have to grant that because he's a neuroscientist, or he was a neuroscientist or a neurobiologist, so he would have been able to provide, and he has basically in the last 15 to 20 minutes showed why it's sort of impossible to do a lot of things in medicine and neurobiology without...
I can see why you'd want rats in neurobiology, because it's the likeness of the human brain, isn't it? That's why they use rats.
Right. It's just that they're basically, like, in terms of their statistical anatomical, or in terms of their anatomy, basically, it's going to be very, very similar to human beings.
I mean, apart from the having multiple livers and stuff.
Yeah. No, I should have said, yeah, probably with respect to the brain, yeah, like you basically sort of said. And he also said something like extraction of cerebral spinal fluid. But there's a lot of empirical details and nuances that would be probably lost to someone like me. That's why I'm asking him if he wants to come on just for a brief moment to get rid of to kind of talk about those.
Yeah.
Empirical...
I mean, I'm obviously I'd have to reach out to like obviously again some sort of vegan scientist at some point, and then would definitely like if we're going to battle the empirical kind of side of things. I don't think I would I very much doubt I would be able to hold my own with a neuroscientist in that. I think I can accept my own limitations.
Well, but that's why it's sort of interesting, is because I don't think I mean I can't answer any of the questions either, and if you can't either, I think it is a matter, at least at this point, if we just because we can give this sort of reply like, oh well, if everything is sentient, then we should treat them just as much as sentient human beings, and it would be similar to Auschwitz and all that kind of stuff. But there is a legitimate concern. I think that killing a few thousand rats or test mouse test subjects of some sort, that you could make a sort of consequentialist argument.
I think you could make a better consequentialist argument for testing it upon someone, let's say like criminals who, they're humans. So when we're talking about like the likelihood of it being applicable to humans is even higher than on rats, and it also acts as a deterrence in relation to people committing crimes. And then that's not even and I mean, I guess the counter argument against that would be the slippery slope. We would need criminals then to test upon, and I guess that would be the only real like. I get the counter against that. I think would just be simply the pragmatics of it, the likelihood of having a crimeless society.
Yeah, I don't know how it would look like. I think the best way of answering this, as you basically kind of might have intuited earlier, is empirically, is trying to demonstrate whether or not modern... I also brought up the point whether or not modern medicine is justified in the types of consequentialist aims that it claims to.
That's a solid way to look at it, actually. That's a good one,
Yeah, because I remember reading something about Ivan Ilyich basically saying a lot of the types of goods that have come about from modern medicine are actually due to, they're due to like hygiene and, good diets and basically just kind of like, the sewer system and things like that, right? It wouldn't be necessarily medicine itself, as opposed to how just we take care of ourselves and groom ourselves.
Maybe beyond vaccines, which have maybe like one of the few things that have been established as perhaps one of having some of the greatest outcomes, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the vaccines actually, but probably. Yeah, probably. I think it was mostly due to hygiene, is what Ivan Ilyich.
Oh yeah, hygiene is definitely. I mean, like it was like a 50% chance you'd die if you broke your leg, and it was a compound fracture, so if it like broke the skin. There was like a 50% chance of death in surgery before hygiene standards were established. So like it's been considerable. I think as well. Like I think one of the things I would like to really pull it back to really is whether medicine itself can be understood without reference to an ethical standard from which it's trying to achieve. And so when we talk about that which is good in the first place, when we talk about that, like whether medicine is good or whether it is bad, we're actually referencing an aspect of human life or sentient life in the first place. So if we're talking about whether medicine is good and whether we should perform medicine, it's already in reference to the overall outcome, the positive and negative outcome that it would produce. And so if we talk about the consideration of animals and sentient beings as a whole as being good and the instantiation of medicine, then medicine itself would be judged against the standard from how it would harm animals. And I think that would have to look at like, so for example, the way in which medicine like even behaves. Like let's say we agreed that there needed to be a certain level of testing on sentient beings, whether that be human or animal. And I would probably advocate for like prisoners before I would advocate for animals. But let's say there needed to be a certain level, in relation to sentient beings, and we agreed upon that as a minimum standard for medical research to function. I think that then we would also limit medical research in terms of sentient being research to a very small number of select necessary cases for medicine to progress. It would be very different to how it is now, in which it's really part of budgeting and the way in which medical research is engaged as a whole. people just put in request forms for animals. Animals aren't even considered at all. But if they were given the consideration of, being equal and alike that to humans, then the consideration of like, oh fuck, we need a test on animals is an absolute moral, it has a much greater moral weight to it, and so people would not be putting so much, so many tests forward, especially when they're redundant. There are so many redundant. I think Singer actually shows this. There are so many redundant papers that are produced using animal testing, which are either re-establishing things that have already been established, or being done purely for theoretical purposes without any real purport to like medical progress. So these are the things that need to be challenged as well.
Yeah, that second claim I think is a little bit more interesting, because I don't know how I feel. Obviously, I don't have any record, any sort of arguments against this, but I don't know how I feel about putting people who have lost their rights and who are in jail, or prisoners, basically.
I think it's absolutely disgusting. I don't advocate for either. If they're avoidable, I think that would be the point.
Yeah. Well, this kind of gets into the topic back again about asymmetries between animals and human beings, but I don't know if I'm ready to go on that to that path right now, and maybe we should just continue to where we were going to go initially in our conversation.
Somebody just said, why prisoners? What the fuck? I think that the important thing would be to distinguish, let's say, what prisoners it would be, and I think that the only way I'd be able to justify this, and very much so, I'd definitely go deontological with this in the first place, but I think the only way I'd be able to justify this is in relation to a value transaction between a prisoner who's committed murder and who would otherwise been sentenced to death. And that's how I would probably rationalize it. So if capital punishment was a plausibility or a possibility, then the individual would be given the free choice of accepting either the medical research or the capital punishment. And I think that would be perhaps a way to kind of stave it off. So I certainly would rather neither. And I think that's the thing. I think it's what the argument's in a consequentialist basis, and I just want to establish this. I'm not advocating we test things on prisoners, and I am not advocating we test things on animals. Please do not attribute those positions to me.
Okay, cool. So, would you like to begin the? You said you had a question about the questions themselves. You don't know what that is, or something like that.
Well, yeah. Let's get into it. So, what are the questions we're answering anyway, man?
I kind of already gave them to you on your in your.
I saw the questions. I mean, like, what's the? It's like, is it like what is it like? You said it was something going around.
Well, no, these questions have been. I'm surprised you're not familiar with them. I mean, they're basically a question. It's from, what was it again? Philosophy polls or philosophy survey polls. They were asked basically like 4 or 6 years ago to a lot of major faculty members in several types of universities. So we now have kind of polls of what different types of positions people hold in philosophy. And these particular questions kind of give a good overview of what your metaphysics might be like, right? I don't think they completely get at what our metaphysical systems are like, but they at least give a ballpark range of what we believe in. Let's say if we believe in a priori knowledge, or whether we're theists or non-theists or things like that. So that's what they're supposed to sort of address is like what types of isms, I guess, are in our philosophy.
All right, cool, man.
Yeah,
oh my God, I'm joking.
So do you have the questions right in front of you? If you
I have them in front of me.
Okay. So did you want to? Yeah, let's start with the first one, just for the audience. I guess is a priori knowledge? Does it exist? Basically, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. And what would your particular opinions on that one be?
I suppose somewhat close to like a transcendental the transcendental kind of instantiation of like first principles is where I'd probably go. So like kind of Kantian. I would say that a priori knowledge I would say that it exists in the establishment of, essentially in the application of logic to any given reality. So for something to be itself and only itself, for example, I would say that that is the instantiation of something that would be a priori knowledge. So yeah, I think like, I don't know if I've explained that well enough, but yeah.
Do you have a justification for a priori synthetic claims, or is that something that you are a little bit more hesitant with?
I do agree with the justification for a priori synthetic claims, and I would say that that is in and of itself, I would say that that is, I think they are true, but that they are separate from a priori in the sense that not only that the synthetic nature of them means that they are that when they are being conceived of, they are fallibilist in the sense that we do not have perfect a priori synthetic knowledge, if you understand this. Sure. So that would be the caveat there. That would probably be like my Hegel to the Kant kind of separation.
Okay. I guess on the first question, I would probably, well, I mean, it's not surprising that I would believe in a priori deductions. I would believe in a priori synthetic deductions of some sort. And I've already kind of given an explanation to you before. Very Kantian about this. I think mathematics, not all of them, but some of them, a good amount of them are probably a priori synthetic notions, because we have to use one of the sort of sensible conditions of intuition, which is time. And if you don't really want to consider that a sensible condition, I would say at least we have to, when we're doing mathematics, conceive of time in some sort of way that would be a little bit more trivial than Kant does. So when we, as I've said before in kind of your stream, when we're doing like simple equations like, I don't know, 5 plus 3, and then we say it equals 8, right? We have to take the 5. And then when we get to the second number, we have to take the 3, reproduce the 5 within time, right? We have to sort of reproduce the first number within the present moment. And when we do that, right, we sort of create a synthesis between the past and present in terms of its chronology. And we then sort of equal them out in the third presentation of time. That requires a certain type of temporal ordering. And it seems as though if it does require a certain type of temporal ordering, you have to synthesize it with the sort of at least, yeah, with time itself. The same thing could be sort of said with geometry. So you can kind of give an a priori deduction of geometry, except instead of time, you need space. And then also there seems to be certain types of problems of indetermination. I'm sure you know, like the sort of Dunham-Quine thesis, and general kind of underdeterminations in empiricism. So I would probably say a priori arguments, because of the dogmas of empiricism, have to sort of be made. So yeah, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, no, that did. Yeah, solid, man.
Yeah,
bit Kantian for me in some respects, but what about the synthetic? Well, you did say actually you actually established that quite well. I think when you were talking about like time, actually.
Yeah. I think a priori notions that are analytic are kind of like trivially true, because all they're trying to show is a redundancy. However, actually, one more thing that is kind of I think might be grounded a priori is the entire dialectic, like within the science of logic, and the speculative judgment of where we have unity and opposites. So the law, not the law of identity, A equals A, but A equals, and then bracket, A equals not A, and then end the bracket. The speculative judgment within Hegel, basically, that tries to show that every single affirmation includes its negation.
I would actually agree. Yeah, it would be a priori. We say a priori differently, and I think that's kind of funny. I think I saw debates about. I think that Rem actually did a poll of how people, like, there are like 4 different possible ways in which people were saying a priori. There's a priori, a priori, priori, and a priori, and it's like. I think that's just hilarious. I think that's the funniest take out of all of it. I don't know why. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's fun. It's like Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Nietzsche.
I've heard Nietzsche so many times. And I don't know why Nietzsche, just like I've heard people say like Friedrich Nietzsche, and I don't know why that just annoys me so much. Like more than his philosophy. And I think that
No, I understand.
But yeah, let's continue, man.
So I'm not going to have like the clearest answers. Some of these are going to kind of, I think, go on intuitions to some extent. So the second question is abstract objects, nominalism, or Platonism. You could always take a third. Sometimes sometimes it's like neither of those are, right. So we're gonna get. We are going to get into hard questions. So
yeah, I was going to say like the issue is like obviously with the like I'm not a nominalist because I'm a Hegelian, so I believe that we can actually gain knowledge of the universals. But then I wouldn't say that it's Platonic in the sense that I would say that it's probably closest to Platonism, but it's not Platonism. So if that kind of answers that, it's like I don't think necessarily. I don't think that it's a clear dichotomy, as you say. Like I think that there is a third option there. But I guess if it was talking about abstract objects, it wouldn't be Platonism in the sense that I don't believe that it's in the way in which kind of Plato deduces the forms and the unity of being. But I don't. They wouldn't probably say the unity of being, but the end of the dialectic. I think that the fact is that like Hegel would agree that we can come to knowledge of the thing in of itself through the dialectic, and so yeah, probably closest to Platonism.
So this one's kind of hard for me. I think I'm not sure if you've heard of the article. A lot of people have been talking about it lately about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics and the natural sciences by Eugene Vigna.
I haven't.
Yeah, that's. I mean, sort of the article. I haven't read it myself. I've heard people talk about it. People like what's his name? Who is that classic theist that is everywhere arguing for the Kalim cosmological argument?
William Lane Craig.
Right. William Lane Craig basically was on arguing.
You shouldn't be able to point at someone like that.
Yeah. No, but well, he's not the only one that sort of argues for the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematical Platonism. I mean, at least the idea that there seems to be a mathematically structured universe, and I think this is sort of becoming more and more in agreement with physicists that we can't just say that everything about our mathematical structures are just sort of generated by the mind. They seem to be actually instantiated within the world. I mean, the amount of surface area that you have in a certain type of room that you can apply paint to would actually be a certain type of magnitude with a certain type of mathematical just a certain type of mathematical amount of volume in it.
Yeah, I would.
That, and it just seems like certain types of mathematical equations do just seem, and this is just an intuition, this isn't an argument, guys, seem to be the way that the universe seems to physically operate too. So, but that's it. And that, and just concepts in general. It wouldn't have to necessarily even be mathematical ones, but concepts in general. Since I am a conceptual realist. Yeah,
I would agree, man. I think you make.
Yeah, seem to be kind of instantiated in reality, regardless. So if we just take if we argue just for mathematical ones, or sort of a mathematical Platonism, then that doesn't seem too far off with it being compatible with my philosophy either. And I can argue, I think, for the sort of conceptual realism in general, if we wanted to get into that, but I think we are in agreement with at least that. So
yeah, I think like obviously like this almost sounds like like Brandom, Lacan, object oriented language implies the existence of the real. And so like when we talk about one, it's and like it's a signification of something, and that unit implies a unit of existence of something. The same thing with like P implies the existence of P, whatever it is. Like the concept implies the existence or the possibility of that existence, and for it even function as a signifier. And I think that's the best way to argue for it. And in general, I think that's, yeah, absolutely. I think nominalism's wrong in that respect. So yeah, like I think we're in agreement, man.
So the third question is, we might be actually in disagreement with this.
God. At this one.
No, actually, no. I think, yeah, I remember we might be in agreement. So aesthetic value, objective or subjective, or neither?
Neither.
Really?
So I would say that it's objective judgment, but those judgments are based around what I would say maybe like it's kind of like almost trivial. It's like it's basically approval itself rather than any actual feature of reality. So it's objective in the sense that it is like it's in a Kantian like objective judgment sense, but that I wouldn't say that it actually is instantiation of a beautiful thing, for example.
Okay. Well, that's not either. That is probably towards the subjective end, and looks like we are going to agree on. Yeah, I'm actually a little bit worried that we might not disagree at all by the end of this this question skip. But yeah, also subjective. I think what you're looking for right there, to put it into words, is that the judgment is going to rely on the subject. The standard is universal. The judgment, however, can't find determinate notions of how to exactly place a particular example into this universal category. And so it's always going to try to approach this universal category without quite getting there. That's why it's not a subsumptive judgment, but a reflective judgment for Kant.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, a very nice way of putting it, much more eloquently than I did.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I could probably say about the aesthetic judgment from reading the third critique, which I'm kind of in agreement with. I will say one thing. I am, and I think you are as well. We had that conversation, sort of really sympathetic with the idea of beauty existing in and of itself as well, in a sort of Aristotelian kind of way, if I understand him correctly. Or really, I think kind of a lot of thinkers maybe within the Greek era might have thought that beauty actually literally existed within the world. But because because aesthetic seems to have this generative quality to itself, that is, when we create a sort of work of art, if you will, there is something that I think the subject kind of places upon the work of art that they're creating, namely a concept that is, in a sense, created from nothing. That is a novel thing. It is a sort of emergent property, if you will, from the subject kind of putting his creative hand upon the piece of painting. In a way, the human subject is kind of acting freely, I think, in this sort of generative act.
I would agree.
In this sort of playful act.
I would agree, and I would even say that that's one of the arguments kind of given by Chomsky in relation to why Marxist alienation is so bad, because it's alienation from our creativity is an inherent negative for Chomsky. It's like it's a removal of our freedom, and I think that's kind of what, in terms of, like, not to make it political, but I think that's I think that is like a solid way to look at it, because I think if we look at the natural creative processes of humanity as being essentially the enactment and that labor, that behavior itself is an act of labor in which we discharge ourselves and mix ourselves into the world and objectify ourselves and come to have an understanding of self in both a Hegelian sense, and even in terms of just purely what we are attempting to do. If we are trying to modify the world in the sense of that's what the will actually would be defined as, then creativity, if we are alienated from our creativity, then we have lost an aspect of our freedom.
Yeah, I can you go can you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, I'm not picking it all up. I know what I mean right here is just a literally kind of like a libertarian sense of freedom of where prior constraints wouldn't have had any sort of regard to what the types of what the type of content that we see within the result of our artwork would be.
Well,
So like, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, so when we produce something like artwork, for example, it's it would be essentially the objectification of the self in the world, since it would be
Right.
purely it would be purely the engagement, the free engagement of a subject in order to
Right.
modify the world in terms of the production of the imagination, which is essentially private to that individual, or at least
Okay.
individual to that mind.
Right.
And so if artwork was like, and this is one of the reasons why I argued that the advertising itself might be one of the most perverse forms of alienation. If we take artists and start using their imaginations as a means to actualize the imagination of another individual, then we, like, especially if it's like, something that's mass produced and fitting a certain standard, what we're doing then is actually taking the creative process of an individual and using that as a way to instantiate and objectify something from the mind of another. And so in many ways it's the one of the most dominant forms of oppression, in terms of like actually managing to take the creative control of an individual. Is arguably it's arguably impossible in its end, which I would say. But in terms of, like, to a certain degree, the alienation of that individual, I would say, may be one of the most severe forms of alienation.
I see what you mean now. Yes.
And
yeah, I think yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that's what Chomsky's kind of getting at. Like, Chomsky's really big on this whole creative process thing.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard anything from Chomsky about aesthetics or art in general. I'm definitely gonna have to kind of check that one out.
Well, he thinks that creative process is not just about art, but obviously about like all action, and I think that's kind of and even when he talks about, obviously it ties into his linguistic theories, but like but in all action. So when he's talking about there's a famous quote that he uses, I think it's by Humboldt, which is like the elevation of the worker into like the elevation of the worker into the artist or the artisan, and how like the acts that we commit in day-to-day life that we find alienating and frustrating would be some of the most honored acts in our society if we were able to actually engage in our job roles in a way that we didn't feel alienated. So if I was, if I wanted and I willed to be, let's say, a bin man even, the way in which I performed that action would be an aspect of my creative control over the job. But because I'm held to a certain procedural standard that is confining and constricting my, from which I can't control, from which I'm not allowed to engage in a democratic sense, I'm held to a standard which is imposing upon me the way in which I can express my imagination and creativity in the world, and so is alienating me from my creative process and my subjectivity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on to the shit. Where'd I put the questions at? This one, I guess we've kind of already answered. The fourth question is analytic-synthetic distinction, yes or no? I'm I think we kind of answered that one. I would probably say a hard yes. I don't even know what it would really mean not to make a distinction between.
I don't either, to be entirely honest with you. I find it a bit confusing more than anything. So yeah, I'm with you, to be entirely honest with you.
Maybe they're trying to, I don't know if they're trying to collapse the analytic-synthetic distinction. I don't know why Quine is ringing a bell if he is someone who tries to collapse that distinction altogether, but he might just, from what I recall, he just wants to be set within a posteriori arguments altogether, except in cases where we have things like the law of identity or whatever. We're just basically putting the definition of the thing into a sort of symbolic notion, namely a word, and that word just means what we want it to mean, right? And that's trivially a priori analytic, but
I think
someone says that.
What kind of rings a bell there is almost like maybe people like John Locke, Bertrand Russell, kind of like the especially Bertrand Russell, where it's like the theory of judgment. The judgment itself is abstracted from reality, and so the analytic judgment is actually a reflection of direct relation to the empirical, to material.
It's like one of my members is actually telling me that I think I was right, is that Quine does reject the analytic-synthetic. I'm asking him if he has a TLDR of this of Quine's argument. It might just be it just might be the case that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to see it.
Honestly, one second. You keep going. I'm just going to quickly flip the Quine because I think it's actually the two dogmas is in this.
I think so. I can't remember exactly where it would have been in Quine.
I don't. You see, this is the beautiful thing about having this book, man. I cannot recommend this enough. Philosophy of the Classic Readings. The two dogmas in here. I think it's under Metaphysical.
I actually think I have the Quine book right behind me, but I'm not gonna get it if you know where it is. So.
831. I think it's where's bloody epistemics. That was what would be under two dogmas of empiricism.
Quine thinks that analytic statements are verified holistically in a way continuous with science. That's the TLDR. That's just not enough information. Build the wall. One of the members on here.
This is
yeah.
Sorry, continue.
No, I mean I just don't. I wouldn't have enough information to kind of go on stating an opinion about why Quine is right or wrong. I'd have to look into it. It would be very odd to me. Yeah, it seems very odd to me to collapse the distinction altogether.
Sorry, continue.
We can go towards the next one while you're looking that up, the next question.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so the next question is epistemic justification, internalism or externalism?
Right, sorry. Okay, all right, I'm just going to give that up because I've got the part why he's actually arguing it. I just can't read it at the same time as listening. So there's like, He makes a distinction between two classes of analytic arguments, which is like, and the first is no unmarried man is married and no bachelor is married, and he's making a distinction between them. I'm not sure why, and I'll research that after this. Sorry, so say that again.
Hold on, one of my members is actually saying something. He's basically saying that Quine thinks that claims like 2 + 2 = 4 are true because they are confirmed in experience. I mean, I get that, but that's not a collapsement of the analytic-synthetic distinction. That's a collapsement of the a priori, a posteriori distinction.
Yeah, but I think what the whole point is that it's kind of like John Locke's position that logic itself is learnt through an abstraction from reality, and so logic is understood from observation of being rather than a process of mind applied to reality. So it's the separation of how concepts actually come to be. And I think that this falls apart, and that's why I brought up Russell in terms of direct relation and judgment, because I think this is taken apart by Peter Geach's critique of knowledge by acquaintance and Russell's theory of judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, I know that Quine, if he was asked a question like, well, how do you deduce any sort of mathematical statements, he would just basically say, like, look, statements like the ones that we were talking about earlier, 5 + 3 = 8 or whatever, you think that you might be able to derive a necessity of that such that you can apply it to all future experiences. But I think he would just be sort of an empiricist about it in the sense that he says, like, no, you can't. You can only basically say it's true insofar as we've done it every single time, and there's no necessity towards those types of equations. Although I could be wrong. Maybe he has another response to it. I haven't read Quine. Very much.
I don't think I could add anything of value. I think someone just asked why I don't join the philosophy chat. I think that is. I am in the philosophy chat Discord. So yeah, I'm there. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so this next question was, again, the epistemic justification, internalism or externalism.
Right.
Oh, hold on. Someone's at my door.
No problem. So,
Right back.
I'll just click off the bloody questions. Epistemic justification, internalism or externalism? But what if you're an objective idealist and there's no such thing? Like, it's hermeneutic. It's hermeneutic. No, it's hermeneutic. No, this is impossible. Oh. So I hope you're all enjoying this stream. Bit of a strange. I know the platform, like this platform, like YouTube, like the one that we're on right now, broke for loads of people. It kind of broke for me before the start of this stream as well. So I thought I think that's really strange. So like it's kind of lucky that we're even here, really, because it was like this, like trending on Twitter, like hashtag YouTube down. And stuff. I'm also, by the way, in case anyone's interested, I've reached out, by the way, to vegan gains to try and get him on the stream, talk socialism again, since he'd be interested in a discussion. He hasn't gotten back to us again, like, even though he said yes, he hasn't gotten back to us yet, so that's kind of weird. But I'm also going to have a Jewish person on to talk about whether vegans are right in describing animal agriculture and what's happening in animals in terms of the mass slaughter of animals as a Holocaust. So that should be really interesting. Obviously, I'm going to be talking from the position of, what's he called? It's like a Holocaust survivor. It's like there's a Warsaw survivor who argues that it's okay. And so I'm not going to be prosing, like, obviously I'm going to handle the situation delicately. I understand that it could be highly offensive to some people, but I want to try and question why you would find it offensive in the first place. Maybe ask, maybe the offense is because of the already like lower moral status and ethical status of animals, and so the offense is in and of itself an establishment of why it needs to be compared, because it's a question of the state, it's a challenge of the status quo, it's a form of linguistic rebellion, if you will. So yeah, that should be interesting. Obviously, welcome back, man. How are you doing?
Oh no, I was just listening in, so yeah, you could finish.
No, it's okay. Let's get back to it.
Have you already answered your end on that?
I said I'm hermeneutic, so this is tragic for me. like internal or external. What's the difference?
Yeah, so the difference is basically when we ask the question, what justifies a belief, the answer is going to be generally a sort of a number of things, right? Either other beliefs, in which we'd be sort of internalists about justification, these other beliefs being presumably propositional, and let's say you're a Salarzian or a Brandonian or whatever, then justification is done always inferentially, and that would be a type of internalism as far as I know.
I was going to ask that because, like, is it internalism if the self, if there is only the self understanding the self, if you're an objective idealist or absolute idealist, because it's kind of internalism in the sense that it's a correspondence theory of truth would correspond only to the self. It is the self corresponding to itself in terms of the conception of reality with reality itself.
Right here, we're only looking at justification. We're not looking at the content of our experience. You can be an externalist about the content of our experience, but we're just talking about mere justification. So what is doing the justifying within our beliefs? If you believe in something like justified true belief, then what's going to do the justification, right, is basically going to be another belief. Now, it might be the case that there are other types of things doing justification that aren't just certain types of propositional attitudes or beliefs. So the roles of like maybe intuitions of some sort or seeming seeings of some sort that offer some form of justification. If we're not just looking at propositional content, but if we're looking at like how animals might know, there might be certain types of mechanisms involved that don't necessarily get into internalist forms of justification. But I think, for me, it's very hard to find out exactly what things outside of internalist forms of justifications exactly are.
See, I think that you could argue that there was...
But there would be I think there might be certain types of things like evolutionary explanations or things like that.
I think you could argue that, could you not argue that it would be a form of, it's whether whether the belief itself can be, would it be internalism if you would argue that the belief itself was modified by an external cause? Do you know what I mean?
Is the subject aware of it? That's the kind of question that you have to ask yourself. If the subject is not aware of how they knew, how they justified it, how could you call that JTB, right?
I think you're probably right. I think you're probably right. It's probably internal. I'd have to give it more consideration, but I think I'd probably lean towards internal.
Yeah, well, I can see some. I think there's a book written about it. Knowing without being aware or something like that. I can't remember what the name of the title was, but
that just sounds wrong.
Well, I don't know. I guess to help you out a little bit right here, one might argue, even from a Heideggerian lens, that certain forms of externalism might be compatible with Heidegger, because one kind of places their hand on a doorknob or positions themselves in a certain type of way to kick a ball in soccer. They might not be aware of what they're doing, right? There's certain types of mechanisms involved in kicking it, know-hows. Sorry. T. But nonetheless, we would say something like they still know, right? Even though they don't have justification in the sort of regular sense.
I suppose what you're saying, I think that's quite a good point. It's almost as if the belief itself would change the experience of reality, and so prevent the proper engagement with reality, which is actually a solid... I don't know how I'd respond. I think I need more time to formulate an actual response to that, but I like that. That's But this is why I was saying, is it not hermeneutic, in the sense that, obviously, if in the sense of Hegel, it's the self understanding the self, and obviously there's aspects of the self that are unknown to the self, so the justifications that even exist within the self would be unknown to the self.
Right. Well, another concern that I would also have, if you're a conceptual realist, the conceptual content that exists externally obviously forms a relation of what we generally find as justification for our internal beliefs. So, perhaps the dichotomy there would sort of break down in good old German idealism, and that's actually something that I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah.
But then, I also think, God damn, is that really incompatible with the notion of justification internalism and content externalism? And I don't know. It's really hard to exactly fit that all in my head.
That is, I think it's just going to need more thought. I think, this is why I wanted to say hermeneutic, because it's as if the external and the internal are two aspects of the unity of opposites for Hegel, as you say, in terms of idealism. And so like the dichotomy breaks down. But then in terms of when we talk about it, it's like what we actually mean by external and internal isn't really affected by it, which is why like Hegel's offering an instantiation of science. Do you know what I mean? In the phenomenology of spirit and his other works. He's trying to establish science as being objective and something that we should actually give credence to. And obviously he's not trying to establish some sort of rejection of the methodologies from which science is actually engaged in. And so when we're talking about the methodological approach and how we're describing these methodologies, maybe it's a language issue rather than like a metaphysical one. So
yeah. I mean, there's always perhaps limits to certain types of analytic jargon with respect to, you know, developing our beliefs and exactly where they stand. That's kind of why I struggle with some of the questions here as well. One of our members actually said it's a bad distinction because even from Brandon, the norms governing which propositions count as justification are external in an intersubjective way. He's right. I'm not, and again, the only thing that I push back on with respect to this member who said that is that I'm not sure exactly if that is all with respect to justification or whether or not that is with respect to an externalism about content. Because even like Kant, right, he's basically saying like the notion of our sensibility brings in content itself, but that content doesn't mean anything without concepts. And so he's an internalist about justification and an externalist about content. But I think Brandon might also be like somehow both, or Hegel might be somehow both with respect to these. But yeah, that's going to require some time to maybe unpack exactly.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So the next question I think is also hard and might get into certain types of terminological issues. External world, idealism, skepticism, or non-skeptical realism.
By the way, we're definitely going to have to pick this up, otherwise we're not going to get through these questions.
Yeah, we got 30 of them. So
external world, idealism, skepticism, or non-skeptical idealism.
Idealism.
Well, I'm an objective idealist, so I'm like a absolute idealist. So it's kind of like I'm an idealist, but like it's not the same. Yeah. So yeah, idealism.
Yeah. So yeah. The non-skeptical realism. I'm kind of curious exactly what they mean. Okay. Well, if they mean a realism of which the ideal is in it, then yeah, I'm an ideal realist. I mean, this is actually a term that Schelling uses. Of course, I think that there's an actual real world outside of our personal indexed experiences. But if you hold an identity theory of truth, like I do, then there really is no difference between our experience and how the world is. That is to say that a lot of what our experience is in terms of its content, both its content and its form is, well, in the world, right? That's the conceptual realism and the realism about its content. So, it's just like realism and idealism, I would say to this kind of question, are not in conflict.
No, I don't think they're in conflict either. I was trying to answer that question before someone donated askers, and I think they understood. And it was essentially the argument was essentially like what would sorry, I'm trying to formulate this again. Actually, I'll just scroll down because that actually answers it via super chat. So it was if all minds disappear, does reality cease to exist? And I was saying from a Hegelian standpoint, it's not that reality in all of its aspects ceases to exist. It's that Hegel sees it as in a combination of three infinites: the infinite of the self, the infinite of the other, and the infinite of matter as the fundamental integral part of the world as we know it. And specifically, as we know it is the important thing, and what can be known in relation to that. It's the determinate objects of our experience. It's not that they don't exist. So when we describe matter, we are describing we are describing an aspect of our experience of matter. But when we talk about matter itself, that which makes all possibilities of determinate objects, that like in terms of material, that could pre-exist the world in which the reality in which we talk about. But even then, it's like we wouldn't know if it did, and we'll just say that it's infinite. So it's not something that we can make a knowledge claim about.
Yeah, I think okay. I'm sympathetic to what some of you said, but I think you're doing yourself a disservice there by saying that any experiencer needs to be there, or any subject needs to be there. I think what we need to focus on is that experience of some sort, the content and the form of our experience, can be separated from the subject in a way, to where we can externalize that feature. We don't need to make these types of claims. I think that subjectivity needs to exist, or at least human subjectivity needs to exist in order for the world to exist.
I think the point would be that, like, for us to make knowledge claims about the world, that it would need to exist. I mean, you could argue that it would you could argue that in terms of rather than in terms of the world's existence, you could say that you could say in principle that like a subjectivity in principle would need to be able to exist in that situation for it to be possibly knowable. In which case, then what we are doing when we're investigating the past in terms of history, or in terms of like I don't know, like something like the physical understanding of the universe, is really to try and observe the features of reality to construct the determinate nature of reality, and understand what it would have been, and it's as if we were, in principle, if we were there, this is what it would be, and I guess that would be the only way that I would kind of be able to remedy it.
Well, I guess I shouldn't focus on this. If we want to rush through this, we should just make a question. So the seventh question is free will, compatibilism, libertarianism, or no free will at all?
I have a problem with the conception of free will in general, but I would say libertarianism, I suppose. It depends on how we define them, more than anything. I'm like, with being a Hegelian, it's like, I don't think that it's libertarian as in you don't choose having a drive, for example. Like, that's not something that I don't think that you can deny. And so it would be like compatibilist in that sense. But then obviously your second order drives and the content of your desires is a choice in Hegel. So it's somewhere probably between, like, it's definitely an instantiation of free will, if you consider that libertarian or compatibilism in that respect. I think it's something that's separate from that conception of free will. And I think that's because that kind of tripartite distinction of free will is somewhat somewhat analytic in origin.
So what I would have to say there is it also sort of depends for me. So if we were to understand libertarianism as something meaning that the subject is constrained by nothing at all in any sort of way, that would obviously be false, and that there are, that we're acting sort of with no purpose, no reason, no desires, no disposition. We could never, I guess, even answer a simple question of why A over B. Mm-hmm. But if we ask the question, what is it exactly within our nature that we're operating within that is reason giving, and these principles that we're operating with, these reasons are from ourselves and not sort of external to ourselves, the form that is to say is within our nature, then we are acting completely freely. And I think we could probably say this is a form of libertarian free will. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by this is that, okay, of course, there's a sort of genetic, historical, natural sort of explanation for why consciousness is the way that it is. But as I've said sort of before in a lot of my streams, is that just because there's a reason for the existence of consciousness does not therefore make an argument in favor that consciousness is reducible to the reasons that it emerged. So it could be the case that consciousness has a sort of sui generis quality, namely reason itself, that sort of constructs its own principles, or constructed its sort of principles in terms of how it sort of evolved. And then those are basically us in one sense or another, right? We're not separated from that form of reason. And if we are employing these types of reasons in our actions and all that, then we would be said to be self-legislating, self-determining creatures, the cause of our own effects, basically.
I would agree. I would agree. And I think that obviously the only thing that you'd be held to then would be in the same sense of would be that which is possible. And I don't think that obviously that's not any confliction with libertarian free will. So
right,
like so it would be like obviously the instantiation of that you could only act in a way that was like logically coherent.
Right. Well, this is one standard, I think, of reason. Maybe even a larger standard than just reason itself. It might be a standard for everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's people use it to describe in terms of God's omnipotence. It's like, well, God couldn't make square circles, and God couldn't make a stone so heavy that he himself could not lift, and so on like that.
It's funny, I'm not going to get into it, but there's a paper actually about why square circles might be possible under non-Euclidean geometry.
Oh, I know, non-Euclidean geometry, but the I remember there was something actually about non-Euclidean geometry. There's kind of a reply to that, isn't there? But it's just it's a funny thing. It's like I guess one of the things is that I guess really what it depends upon is like the a priori synthetic anyway. It's like, have we defined what a square and a circle is adequately in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I think I see where you would be going with that. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to get into it. I know. I asked a mathematician and a geometrist about this type of question, and they thought that even if you change it from Euclidean to non-Euclidean, it still might be impossible according to
oh, that's interesting. I remember hearing that there was a response to it. I can't remember what the response is for the life of us. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's move on to
let's just try and blast through them, man, because we are not going to get through these.
All right. God, theism, pantheism, or atheism.
You can't just add the pantheism in there, mate. I see theism and atheism. I'm not allowed humanism. You're not allowed pantheism. So...
That's funny. I think they actually edit that one in the poll, and if they didn't, I'm doing it right here. I'm out.
Oh, right. Okay. If I was to choose, I would rather choose like pantheism than theism or atheism. Like humanism, like or like yeah, I'd probably say like or like sentientism, like if I'll just construct that one. So yeah.
Sorry, I'm kind of my chat room's now giving me shit for it. So, no, I mean it's kind of funny because I think that there is at least a good distinction between pantheism and panentheism to bring it up into the dialectic. So I mean you know that I'm a panentheist. I've actually just had a conversation with good old Matthew Siegel about this. It was a very interesting one. But yeah, I put myself basically saying that God exists. He's not incompatible with nature. He actually has the same sort of ontological. He partakes in the same ontological parsimony as nature does. The same causal mechanisms as nature does, and I would basically kind of remove a lot of the sort of predications that God generally has, like omnipotence, kind of get rid of that. Basically say that God is in a sort of process of realizing himself through us. And of course, that's going to sound like a cliche without me defending it, but I have defended it in some of my other videos. So
I don't know. I think I would maybe establish God's omnipotence as the sustenance of possibility itself, and the possibility of actuality, maybe, and then say that this implies that it would imply the and this is what I was saying before, that it implies the omnibenevolence and omniscience would be implied by his omnipotence. So it's whether we consider there's two things to be said, like whether God itself is a concept which is ever growing in a hermeneutic sense, as he self act, like whether it's a unchanging infinite, whether we take it to be the unmoved mover, or whether we take it to be almost the prime mover, which is almost in a state of self-actualizing, and whether we see that as a form of movement or a form of or stagnation, And I think movement is probably more explanatory, and it would explain the in the Aristotelian kind of sense, it would explain causation and motion to a much greater degree anyway. So I don't know, but I think
what.
Sorry.
You know how certain types of people within the field of religion basically say, I'm just going to open up my my cosmological arguments, or any types of arguments that I have for the existence of God. I'm going to open them up so sort of wide that they're compatible with mechanistic philosophy, teleological philosophies. No matter how you want to sort of carve up the world, if you're a mereological nihilist, I'm going to accommodate basically that. So I'm just going
to be the Roman in the scenario. Like,
yeah, I'm gonna be agnostic about a lot of my panentheistic claims, except maybe teleology, because I'm not gonna get rid of that. About how I want to introduce certain types of predications within my conception of God. I'll allow certain, I'll allow a broad range of things. So.
And then this is how you're going to conquer the world, isn't it? You're just going to start like, oh, don't worry. Like panentheism is exactly the same as Hinduism. Like actually, would Hinduism be applicable? I don't know. Well, it would be exactly the same as like Islam. Don't worry. You'd be talking to the Jews. Like, don't worry. Like, Jehovah is absolutely in panentheism. Like knocking on people's doors, like, have you heard the news? I don't know if it's good.
What can I do as we said before, what can I do to convince you of the panentheistic God today? Okay, so I have absolutely no idea what question 10 means, which is knowledge claim, contextualism, relativism, or invariantism. I think, yeah, I'm not sure what exactly that means. Do you by any means? You there, people?
I think
perspective philosophy.
I think I'm not gonna lie. I think I would be like doing my best guess at it. I would say that I would think that contextualism, I thought that relativism and, well, invariantism would be knowledge, which would be knowledge is true in and of itself. And relativism would be knowledge which is relatively true in relation to a certain scenario or certain language game, maybe. And then contextualism would be like almost direct relation, knowledge in relation to the context of a scenario. But I think I'm just like taking a shot in the dark, really.
Which one would you have chosen?
Out of what I've just said there.
Oh, you were taking a shot at the dark.
Yeah, it was a shot in the dark. Yeah.
Okay, explaining them. Yeah, I'd still. If knowledge claims are supposed to be contextual, of course, it's kind of like hard to deny that a certain type of context means that a certain type of being or object or whatever I'm talking about would apply in that certain type of context. I don't. If I'm to understand it that way, I can't see myself disagreeing with it. Although I don't know where certain types of a priori necessities would stand in virtue of context. Those would seem invariant. If variantism means like that they would be subject to change, and invariantism is that they're not subject to change, I don't know whenever I would basically say that claims are relative other than like subjective tastes. So I mean, I could see, and I'm not even sure if that's knowledge as much as, we're just talking about the cognitive state of that person.
Funny you say this. I'd probably say relative, because of the existence of language being a socio-political event. And so like this is where like Hegel takes not moral progress. It's like knowledge is relative to the signification within the, like, well, I don't want to go like Lacanian about that really, but knowledge is relative to the socio-historical event in which it's being investigated, in which it's established.
Yeah. Sorry, I was kind of chuckling also because I just saw your video. You're like rubbing your beard. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I've heard this sort of spiel that you've given before about historicizing reason. Of course, we have to historicize reason to some extent. I just don't know if I would apply it to, again, mathematical claims or logical claims or ethical claims, at least certain ethical claims, because that just seems to be rejecting categorical imperatives.
Oh, I'm historicizing everything. Filthy science of logic, like it's something that the logic itself, the foundations of reality itself are in movement. So yeah, I think we're just, it's like, funnily enough, it's whether it actually is exactly what we were talking about before. It's like, do you take the prime mover to be in a constant state of motion, or do you take the prime mover to be, invariant, stagnant?
I see.
So it's kind of funny.
That's funny. Oh, by the way, thank you. So someone just subscribed. So thank you for subscribing, M. Wheatfield, 089. I appreciate the subscription. Thank you again for helping me out here. Yeah, but that's really funny perspective. I am very sympathetic to historicizing reason in the sort of Hegelian sense, but I don't even know if historicizing it completely is exactly what Hegel even wanted to do. But we'll leave it. We'll leave it there.
I think it was. I'll fight that one because he thought the content, that logic was in the content of the thoughts, and that the thoughts were what was progressing.
If I was a staunch processual ontologist that I claim to be, right, that variantism would probably fit in with God and all these sorts of knowledge claims as well. So maybe you're right. I'll definitely fight back on that sometime in the future if you want me to. I have no problem.
Honestly, I think I don't know if I'd even be able to fight that, Clay. I'm just laying down the standard and then running.
That's funny. That's great. What's the God? I got a member basically asking a question. What's the opposite of historicizing when it comes to rationality? I think thoughts dissipate, though. I'm not sure what that means. Anyways, I'll have to answer those questions after this. Okay, question 11. As we're approaching the 1 hour and 15 minute mark.
I was going to say my girlfriend popped her head in there and was looking to go to bed. So we do not have long. So we're going to have to really ramp this up.
All right, let's just answer the questions at this point. Laws of nature, Humean or non-Humean?
Shit. Probably non-Humean.
Yeah, I would have.
Sorry.
It's a hard one for me too. I'd probably say non-Humean as well. Yeah, I'd probably say non-Humean because I believe in a powers view with respect to causes. So yeah, I don't think that's Humeanism.
Yeah, it's like I think like, Humeans like the we just have to accept them. Like there's nothing behind it.
Question 12. Logic, classical or non-classical?
But both.
I think they mean metaphysically which one applies to like the ontology of the world.
Probably non-classical. I don't know if the classical logic's compatible with Hegel because he kind of rejects the law of non-contradiction and stuff.
That's debated actually.
I know it is because he says that a contradiction only exists in the mind and not in nature. So he kind of like his concept of I can't actually see the German word. Sorry. So shit. I guess I'm saying non-classical, but I don't know whether because actually go on classical because I actually agree because rationality rules pushes on this. He was like, so do you agree with the law of non-contradiction? I was like, yes, and then I took the Hegelian stance. So yeah, go on then, classical.
That's funny. Mental content, internalism or externalism. I think I would easily say externalism. I think you'd have to be fucking crazy to be an internalist about mental content.
But what if reality itself is an yeah.
Well, no, it's just mental content.
I know, yeah. I'd take the same.
Okay, cool. Okay, 14. All right. Here we might agree once again. Metaethics, moral realism, or moral anti-realism?
Anti-realism, of course. I mean, yeah, moral realism.
Okay. Yeah, I would have to say moral realism, although, a specific qualifier that the objective moral principles that we begin with are subjective. And then that's going to basically fit into my theory of moral motivation. Metaphilosophy, naturalism or non-naturalism?
Naturalism.
Yeah, I'd have to say non-naturalism for myself.
Naughty boy.
But I mean, it's just like I don't even think we disagree that because like your non-naturalism is probably your naturalism is probably my non-naturalism. Those mean like it's very little.
Meta.
See, like this next one right here, mind, physicalism or non-physicalism?
Non-physicalism.
Yeah, I would definitely say non-physicalism, but basically the same justifications for non-naturalism as well. So, but yeah. I think you're using a broader semantic range of natural, which I would be okay with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, 17, moral judgments, cognitive or non-cognitive?
Cognitive.
Yeah, I would have to say cognitive as well. Begone, what do you call it? Expressivism and motivism.
Oh, no, God. If only it would go away. If only it would go away. It never goes away.
Yeah, it never goes away. You know what the number one question that I get asked on Discord is? Hey Marty, can you prove to me how morals are real and how they're objective?
Oh my God, I know exactly how that feels. I bet there's someone I think someone said that in the chat.
Yeah.
Like and it's like you can only answer it so many times.
By the way, the funny thing is, I don't know if you heard it. There was a lightning. Sorry, there's thunder that just went off exactly after I said that question. So it's funny to me. I actually forgot what the Newcomb's problem is, but question 19 is Newcomb's problem 1 boxes or 2, and I can't remember anymore how it went. So we might I don't know if you remember or not. So
no, not at all.
Yeah. Okay, let's just skip that one then. Normative ethics, deontology, consequentialism, or virtue ethics?
I'm probably going to have to say deontology. but it's probably really like a mix, if I'm honest. So like all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about consequentialism, but I would say that virtue ethics is compatible with deontology, and so I would probably subscribe to both of them.
I would say that consequentialism, deontology, and virtue ethics are all compatible, and I think they're all like expressed in a Hegelian system, because it's like it's like almost like a threshold deontological system built on the attribution of an individual's understanding of a institution and the reasons within the institution, which are overall in respect to human life, or life as a whole, like well, human life for Hegel, but sentient life, what I would argue. And then the virtue ethical point, I would just say like habits are conducive of essentially more efficient moral agents, really.
The next question is question 21. Forgot to put the 21 there, but oh well. Perceptual experience, disjunctivism, qualia theory, representationalism, or sense datum theory?
I'm
not sure if you're familiar with all of these.
No,
I'm familiar
not.
with some of them. So
disjunctivism. I don't think I've ever come across disjunctivism.
McDowell is a disjunctivist. It's basically just the idea that our perceptual experience come in this disjunction between imaginary things and real things. So imaginary things
there
are
we go. That's me. Yeah, there we go. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm actually a disjunctivist, so I just think that certain types of things, that like hallucinations and imaginary events and dreams, they're not of the world at all. Some people think they're maybe of the world in sort of a gradient type way, because we have certain scenario like mirages where they display like half imaginary things and half things from the world. So you wouldn't necessarily create a disjunction, but a continuum. I don't know exactly how far perceptual experiences go, since I don't really study the philosophy of perception too much, but I definitely reject sense data theory, because that just seems like nonsense to me. Like there's no such thing as sense data whatsoever in any sort of capacity. I think we've kind of beat a dead horse when it comes to sense data theory. The empiricists were tragically wrong. Let's move on. Personal identity, biological view, psychological view, or further fact view?
It depends on what we take psychological view to be, because I think that's contestable, really.
I can answer this real quick if you want me to.
I'll probably say psychological. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so I don't know how. I just don't view biology and psychology. I think that that's a sort of false dichotomy, and I don't know what further fact view is. If further fact view means a combination of these two, and I think that was one of the answers in the philosophy survey. So I don't know why that's not on these questions that I gave you.
It's I googled it there because I didn't know what the hell it was either.
Further fact view.
Yeah, it's apparently they're reductionists who argue that everything is that it's physical world at the bottom. So identity would be, physically instantiated. Personal identity would be physical instantiated, and so like I don't know how that necessarily is distinguished from the biological. I'm not entirely sure. That's just a very quick
That's my next question. Yeah.
But yeah, that's apparently what it means. And then I think psychological, man. I think that I think that in terms of like identity itself isn't like, I think we talked about this before in terms of like signification as well. Like I think that will probably explain that one, like in terms of the idea of what happened there.
Okay. Well, I can't. You said something about the biological view. I think the last.
Yeah, like I was just saying that the biological view and the psychological view. Oh shit, I can't remember. It doesn't even matter.
Looks like someone in my chat is basically saying further facts are basically facts which are not reducible to either biology or psychology. Sometimes people think of biological reductivists as denying any further facts. So it's a catch-them-all term. Okay, well, I mean, if that's the case, if further fact view is just basically something that doesn't fall into those two, I would probably put myself in a further fact view. Although, I mean, I wouldn't say so. I mean, I would just say something like this: there are some parts of our identity that are, of course, psychological. I think that there are, and those generally have something to do with biology, but aren't reducible to biology. They have a dependence relation, but aren't reducible. But I would also say further fact of that, the further fact of the matter is that they're like ethical norms, which are a part of our reason, or certain types of epistemic norms, which are part of our reason. These are neither psychological or biological, and I would say that they testify to our personal identity, but all humans, I guess, all human identity. So if that's considered personal or not, if it's not considered personal, then that the further fact would matter.
Kind of, I guess that's kind of a really good point. I think that the psychological view, in my sense, I would say that like, so for example, take something like gender performance. I would say that that's a psychological. I'd say that gender was psychological in origin, but the fittingness of the gender to the subject, as in how at home they will existentially feel with that performance, is usually the instantiation of whether the individual actually actually feels authentic within that gender. I think that's very important. Like, so when you talk about something like transgenderism, you wouldn't just say that someone performing, like an actor doing the performance of another gender, is not a woman or a man when they are on stage performing the opposite gender. They are a man playing a woman. An individual who accepts the identity of being a man or a woman, their acceptance is the instantiation of that identity. And I think that is like something that needs to be considered when we talk about the psychological view, because it's not simply the performance itself. It's the feeling at home. It's the acceptance of the performance. It's the authenticity.
I do like I kind of like the example that you used. I think that's a pretty good example to kind of use in an everyday discussion with people who are sort of confused about constructivism, about gender identity. So I do find that kind of useful. Question 23, politics, communitarianism, egalitarianism, or libertarianism. These are probably false dichotomies, but
yeah.
I mean, like, as much as, I guess I'm all three of these to some extent, so.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I guess if I had to be boiled down to something political, I guess I'd say like egalitarianism. I think these are false dichotomies. I don't think freedom makes sense without equality, for example, or community. And I think that but egalitarianism, if it's just to pick, I'd just say that it encompasses the other two, and it's like kind of like the attack that I think on libertarians, usually the haven't got an understanding of freedom, usually there's the kind of the way that
yeah, sure, I understand what you're trying to say. God, some people have really weird views about libertarian. I mean, just what it really means to talk about libertarian, or sorry, what it really means to talk about free will or rights or autonomy, especially libertarians. So the next question, and we're almost done, so we're definitely speeding through these a lot faster, in case your girlfriend's worried right here. So
it'd be me who's worried, man. What are you talking about? Incur the wrath.
Yeah, no, I get it, man. I don't even know the answer to this next one. Proper names, Phrygian or Millian. No idea what the distinction between Phrygian and Mill are on proper names. It's not something that I've researched. Have you?
Not like in terms of I don't think that they're necessarily they're necessarily incompatible. I thought that there was a combination of the two anyway. I don't know exactly. I don't know the whole thing about it. I think with Frege, it's the something descriptive content, the semantic content is the name is basically aligned with the semantic content from which is describing the name. and then I couldn't tell you what the mill view would be off the top of my head, but then I think there's a combination of the two anyway. So I don't think it's necessarily a dichotomy.
Yeah, someone is saying something about this in my chat room, but I don't know what the hell descriptions versus pointing out an object. Like Shakespeare equals person who wrote Hamlet versus Shakespeare picks out the person.
Yeah, I think that like, so like Frege would be like, because he's a phenomenologist, he's saying that it's like basically a defined set of like parameters from which we use, like for example, it's kind of like in terms of language, it's like what Shakespeare is defined by other words from which we use to do, like we reference to Shakespeare. So like the proper name is referenced against semantic content. Well, like I think Mill, I think the right in this is like literally like would point like you like Shakespeare's that guy. It's like ostensive.
I see.
But there's an argument that combines them both, and I can't remember for the life of us what it is.
Well, let's just move on to the next question for now. I'm probably gonna get confused on the last one, anyways. Here's one we could just kind of like go through really fast. Scientific realism or scientific anti-realism?
Realism.
Yeah, I would probably say realism.
Me and Rem need to have a conversation.
I've had that conversation with Rem, and I still do not get it.
God damn Thomas Kuhn.
I hate it when people reference Kuhn and Fearbend. It's just annoying. Anyways, teletransporter, new matter, survival or death? I would say death myself. So
it depends on the transporter, like the whole point. So, for example, this is something I've spent far too much. I've spent far too much time thinking about this. There's the Star Trek nerd I am. So in Star Trek, they have what's called a what's it called? What's it called? The uncertainty principle. What's it called? Schrodinger. They have what's called a Schrodinger compensator somehow, right? Obviously indiscriminate how the fuck they have that, but they have essentially a means to predict the rotations of your electrons, so they can accurately basically build you up from the exact moment that you are destroyed and then rebuild you. I suppose that this would somehow make sense if you were to say that they would keep you in the process of, because I think the real critique would be that because you're in a process of motion, almost in like the Zeno paradox, that you would have to be in a sense of already being destroyed when they kind of create you. So they would accurately have to mimic the scenario in which you would be in the next moment, rather than take you in the moment you are and then produce you in another moment. They'd have to actually allow you to transform as if you were transforming from one moment to the next, in continuing your state of becoming. And I suppose that would be possible if they were able to predict the atomic fluctuations and the way that the information would modify within you. So in which case I think would fall into like a Higgs replica theory, and it would be you in that respect. Because I think there's no reason to think that the formal and like the other causes wouldn't be attributable to the being that would be created as well.
I get you. I'm just gonna say death. I'm just gonna say death to all that, man. I have a reason for this. I do have a reason for this, but I don't want any actual deaths to take place tonight. So we'll move on to the 27th question.
I like that. Saving us.
The 27th question is time. A theory or B theory? Yeah. Do you want to start?
I don't actually. Well, I think that time. Like time is real, man. And I think that's just the way I'm taking that.
Well, I think I think it's a kind of, I don't know if A theory of time was explicitly presentism and then B theory of time was explicitly internalism, but I think it kind of it was divvied up into that sense. The one thing that I find extremely hard about this particular question is, about any sort of question in time, is that it's like these are a lot of how should I put this? A lot of descriptions on time I see, like within continental philosophy, have almost nothing to do with, or at least I don't see what they have to do with the sort of scientific understanding of time.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that I just want to make clear, I think that the flow of time is real.
I think you'd be rejecting a B theory of time if you believed that. So.
Yeah. And I think that the flow of time is real. I think that it depends on what, like, obviously, like in terms of science, I feel like the way that they're describing time isn't necessarily in the same understanding of time anyway. Like I think you're right. Like, so for example, we could talk about time in and of itself, and then it could be even cyclonic, and in which case it's not necessarily flowing in the sense of being like linear, and it would be a rejection of like linear time. But then I think all this necessarily misses the point of whether we're even discussing the same thing when we talk about time in the sense of like someone like Kant talking about time versus like a theoretical physicist, or like a special relativity consideration of time. Because I think that like time, like space time, for example, I don't think is nearly what I think people are talking about in philosophy, and maybe that's at least in continental philosophy. I think in the philosophy of science, like obviously, absolutely, and it's not something I've really given much thought, and how it would impact me for like the overall philosophy. So I think maybe I just need to read. I probably need to read more physics to like consider like the actual, like the scientific conception of time, like to
yeah. I mean,
sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would probably agree with you. I don't know if there is a scientific consensus about what time is. I know like time asymmetry and symmetry is sort of debated actually quite hotly. I know certain types of people like David Albert take time asymmetry to be sort of a big thing that a lot of physicists aren't looking at. I don't really know how many physicists are actually debating whether or not A theory of time or B theory of time is true or not. I don't know. And I've always found questions concerning time to be really difficult to answer. And I've never really wanted to.
Have you not seen that thing? It's like Augustine, where he's like, forgive me, Lord, for I still do not understand what time is, no matter how hard I try. And it's like it's in his confessions where he's like begging for forgiveness, like asking for mercy because he doesn't understand what time is.
I guess I sympathize with Augustine. I still don't. I still don't. I mean, like, especially when I read about like the Bergson-Einstein debates, and Bergson says something like, I'm not concerned with clock time. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, how is that a criticism? Like, just talking about the subjectivity of time, how does that really answer any of the sort of questions that we have with respect to like physics and with respect to like actual ontological structures of the world? We understand that there's like some sort of subjective element of time. The question is how do we make that compatible with the rest of, the objective standards of time? Unless you just don't believe those at all, and you're like some sort of,
and maybe we're just talking
the ideality of time.
And maybe we're just talking about very separate phenomena anyway. Do you know what I mean?
No, I mean, like, maybe, but they were, I mean, like, it's possible, but they had like lengthy debates. I mean, like, Einstein was apparently a mega douche to Bergson about a lot of these types of things.
Einstein is an absolute, I never realized Einstein is a bastard.
Yeah, no, he was an asshole, man. Like, he was a complete asshole. And I think he plagiarized work too.
Yeah, he did you see his whole thing with his wife? So like he he was having an affair on his wife with his cousin, who he then like, and he wrote this letter to his wife. If you get a chance, read the letter that he wrote to his wife. It makes you feel physically ill. Like, the guy's an absolute bastard. Like, I don't know how anyone could be like that. Like, anyway.
One of my members also said, and he was a pantheist. Yeah. It kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth that he was a pantheist, you know, because now it's just like it has bad parallels with my own philosophy. I just hope I never end up being like you know, like cheating on anybody. It's just like I've always found that really morally repugnant.
I think it's in the letter, what the worst like overall part of this whole thing is that after all of the horrible shit he's done, he then, rather than like, you know, like, oh yeah, I've done this horrible shit, and like at least like try to be somewhat like, you know, redemptive, or you know, like in that respect, he then goes on to treat his wife like shit, like more like shit. And he talks about how he's treating her more like shit. Like, he's basically like saying like, you will do all the housework, you will do this, we will be seen in public together, but apart from that, you will not disturb me except for when you give me food. And then it's like, whoa, what the fuck? He's an absolute like was it like megalomaniac?
Yeah. You know, I don't know what I would be kind of curious at the statistics behind this. I don't even know how you'd sort of be able to quantify it, but like the rate of cheating on your wife or on your husband, and if that's gone up more since the time of Einstein or less. Because like I don't like making broad generalizations, but it generally seems like older people, like the kind of like people in their 50s and 60s, especially if they have a lot of wealth and are kind of traveling a lot. Like these people just generally cheat way more often on their wives and husband. I mean, like I have like this sort of richer, kind of wealthier friend. I'm not gonna, you know, name names or anything like that. But like, you know, he used to cheat on his wife all the time, and she would cheat on him all the time. And it sort of became like a routine that like you both know that you're cheating on each other. And so you're just going to continue on doing that instead of like ever clearing out their air.
You know what I think it genuinely is? I think it's the same thing. You know, in American Psycho, you know, when he's like, he kind of outlines that relationship he has with his girlfriend. It's like, it's okay because I'm doing it as well. And it's like, blah, blah, blah. And it's like that, all that bullshit. I think it's egoism. And I think that it's like almost this understanding that you need each other, but it's using another as a means to an end in its absolute regard. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to be with you, but I will not consider you. And like, this is the whole point of like, I think when it gets to the point in which the stop even considering like it being wrong. And I think that's the real thing. It's like, I think when you hear about like older generations, it seems to be like, especially in terms of Christianity and stuff like that, it's like, you know, failed. You have failed at something. But it's almost like narcissism when you turn and go, but it's okay. Like, my negative qualities are good. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, and like it's almost like and I saw this thing on like a post actually. I was on Twitter, and I don't normally agree with a lot of like woke kind of, you know, takes, but the said like what culture like kind of sees, like teaches teenage boys that consent is not permission but a prize. Now, I don't think that consent is necessarily seen as like not permission, but I think it sees that permission is a prize, so that like victory and the establishment of oneself is at the end of a desire. And I think that this is like a really egoistical take. Do you know what I mean? Like that the expression of desire, of the end of like a particular desire is what you're aiming for. And so, like, I think that like what we're seeing really is that while society's becoming more, I think it's hedonistic consumerism is perpetuating a level of narcissistic egoism, and we're all being like consumed by one desire or another. And if we don't fall into some sort of ethical community, I think veganism is really great. I think, but like ethical community as a whole, and the rational restraint of desires, then we're just going to see the perpetual like downfall of civilization to essentially what Nietzsche was kind of predicting, really.
That's a lot of subjects, especially since you added the Nietzsche part. I'm not even sure.
He
definitely agree.
Wouldn't see it as bad, I don't think, at least in like an objective sense. But sorry, continue.
Well, I mean, like Nietzsche wouldn't consider anything about anything in an objective sense. I mean,
or anything bad, bad.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, of course. Maybe it's like driven by certain. I guess, yeah. The way that you use desires is propositional instead of emotive. So yeah, I mean, of course, it's driven by certain types of propositional desires in that sense, because everything is kind of driven by that. If I'm understanding your metaphysics correctly, I guess I just kind of included that because I just found it sort of weird, and especially among people who have a lot of money and do a lot of traveling, because I guess they just they're divorced from the people that they love so much. They don't see the eye or the face. The eyes or the face of the individual that they're doing damage to. And then they commit these sorts of acts, I don't like Levinas that much, but like Jesus,
the ethics of the face. Yeah,
the ethics of the face kind of like really stick out to me in these sorts of scenarios. Is like, if you're not witnessing the pain of another individual, then they're basically, kind of in a way dead to. So,
but I think that it's like the inconsideration is almost like it is it's like, as you like, almost, I think it's a good way to put it, like death. It's like the death of the other, is how I would say. It's like almost the death of or to another degree, I think it's almost the transposition of the other from a real life actual being to instead the perceived judgment of others. And I think that a lot of people have this idea of it's like the whole, it's like you hear like people talk about like chads and shit like that, and sure. I think that it's this need to be seen, and I think that the Society of the Spectacle could not have been, like, when Debord wrote the Society of the Spectacle, it couldn't have been more right in that. So then that's one aspect. Then you've got the aspect of the psychological. Like, obviously, I think there's so many different reasons. I think that's probably the most common. So the need to be seen. Like you're the rich eccentric billionaire or something, and you need to be like demonstrating your power upon the world so that you don't feel inauthentic. And then you've got the like all the while establishing your inauthenticity. Giving yourself over to bad faith. And then I think you've got the neuroses kind of person who's like if anything in a sense of self-deprecation, and then I think you've got like the kind of individual who is like it's almost like a sorry, I think I guess I'll just leave it there, because I think that you could probably psychoanalyze this to death. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. There's two comments. God bless my chat. Sometimes that these are golden. I had two answers. It's like this should be a whole conversation on its own. A question of cheating touches on Lacan, repression, jouissance, fluid subjects, advertising, narcissism, social media, etc., etc.
It really does. It really does.
It does. And the second comment was like, guys, take notes. This is what Hegelians mean by answering questions briefly and quickly. That's some magic right there. That's golden. But yeah, I mean, I agree with the. Sorry, I'm probably blowing everyone's ears out as I get too close to my mic here. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some truth being said in what one of my one of my members or one of my viewers basically said there. We could have an entire conversation about.
You really could. It's something that it's such a big fucking thing, and I think that's why like there's some really cool I read a lot of I read some psychoanalytic stuff on this. And it's crazy, man. Anyway, let's continue. Almost there.
We're almost there. Question 28, trolley problem. 5 straight ahead, 1 on the sidetrack. Turn requires switching. What ought one do? Switch or don't switch?
Switch.
You switch it?
You switch it. Actually, yeah, switch, yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Switching it means less people die, right?
Yeah, the 1 rather than the 5.
Yeah, don't switch for me. So
really, the intentionalist. Oh,
yeah.
Oh
yeah.
No.
I mean, yeah, I think that there's a certain. I mean, there's probably a certain number for everyone, but for me, it's not 5. So there you go.
I see. I guess what I would say is like it's more to do with you're equally as obligated to everyone, and so in that scenario, it's not that you are trying to harm the 1, but trying to save the 5. So it's the rule of double effect, and you're obligated to save the 5. And so and I would say I would take inaction as a form of action. But I would also say that the intentions of the individual in that sense can then only be made sense in relation to the engagement towards a given consequence. So you are either, when you are not acting and choosing not to act, you are then choosing to value something in relation to your obligation. So you'd have to have a duty which gave you a higher obligation towards the 1 than the 5.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. Although, I mean, one thing that you said, and this is going to be something that we have to discuss a little bit further, but I just don't know how I feel about the idea that omission is the same thing as lying, or not making an action is the same thing as making an action. I just don't know if that's true or not. I mean, there just seems to be a lot of examples of where I omit information, and I don't feel like that's the same thing as lying necessarily. So
yeah, I think there's a separate difference in relation to intention. But then I think that like the intentional state in choosing not to act or to act. So like when you omit something, if your intention isn't to create like isn't to essentially provide, like, I think if you lie, for example, it's the deliberate I'm not even sure if it has anything to do with intention. I would even say that maybe 2 cases of where you both intentionally lie and intentionally omit. Like, I'm still saying that there's an asymmetry between these two. I'm saying omission, and just not telling someone something. I'm just not sure if that's the same thing as like intentionally lying. That is intentionally omitting things. Oh yeah, I think that. No, I'm actually agreeing. I'm saying that. I think that the separation. I think the separation there though exists in the like. So for example, when I said in the terms of Hegel being like, I said intention, I basically said that I think intention only makes sense in relation to the will, and in the engagement of the will. I think that like when you are omitting or whether you're lying, it's in relation to trying to bring around a certain consequence. And so the omission typically it's kind of like the difference between not putting your seatbelt on, or like actually it'd be the difference between driving recklessly maybe and then crashing your car. There's the possibility of the outcome versus the the possibility of the outcome being not prevented versus or being established as a possibility. So it's like the difference between establishing a possibility and actively seeking that possibility is probably the difference there.
Okay. Let's just move on to question 29. No. It's cool. It's cool. That's interesting. Question 29: truth, correspondence, deflationary, or epistemic?
Correspondence.
Yeah. So I would. This is also one of those ones that I think is sort of hard to answer. Don't know how I actually feel about deflationary theories of truth. I know they're actually probably the most popular theories of proof, but other than correspondence. So I just, but I don't think I agree with deflationary accounts of truth. I I don't see epistemic to be antithetical to the type of view that I hold, which is the identity theory of truth. And there is a sort of small nuance distinction between correspondence and identity theory of truth. So I guess that's all I'll say to that. And someone mentioned, like, what about coherentism? I think coherentism would be probably with respect to justification, not truth. So, but maybe there is a correspondence, a coherentist theory of truth as well.
I thought there was I was going to say, I thought there was a coherentist theory of truth. That's like, it was established by, like, it was brought back by Heidegger, wasn't it? Like, but what was I going to say? Like, someone donated, Ruse321, donated $5, said, listen to you both go through the whole field of philosophy while I work out. Appreciate you both. Thank you very much, Ruse. Really appreciate it.
It's funny. Yeah, so I mean, I think you are right. I mean, I do, I guess, yeah, sort of remember that. Generally, I hear it more towards justification than theories of truth, but I guess, yeah, I guess both make sense. The last question, zombies. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, someone in my chat said, PP the murderer, and say, I am the savior. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
You know, it's kind of funny that the abbreviations for your name are PP.
I know.
See, this is I could have made my name just philosophy chat, but I just could not bear the idea of the acronym PC every single time referring to me. You know, PC just got on air, you know, so I had to add the V. Although it sounds pretentious as fuck, since it's just like, what do you mean the philosophy chat? I mean, it's just like, I get that every single time. This is why I just like prefer people call me Marty. So just in case anyone ever said that joke again to me, anytime in the future, it happens about twice a month. Just know I basically want to murder you, whoever you are.
And I think the trolley problem becomes so much easier.
Oh yes. You'll be on the track that I decide not to switch over to. So it'll be an easy choice for me.
Okay, go on. Last one. Let's do it.
Zombies, inconceivable, conceivable, but not metaphysically possible, or metaphysically possible.
When you talk about metaphysically possible, like what are most people, if not zombies? Like,
yeah, go ahead. Unless you want me to answer first.
No, you go on then, because I'm probably going to go on a ramble about meaning.
Yeah. I don't have like a definitive argument for this position as far as I know. I don't want to say I would say that zombies are conceivable but probably not metaphysically possible. I think that's what I remember my stance being on it last. So yeah, I mean, I generally don't think it's possible to talk about the minds without bodies, I guess. So yeah.
Like, so I would say that, like, zombies, I would say that, like, it depends on what we define it as, because I think that the whole point of a zombie really is and the whole point, I was actually going to do this. I was actually going to do film philosophy on this, which is essentially like I think that the instantiation. Last question, by the way, so don't worry. I've already told them that, like, I'm going to get murdered if I don't come off in a second. So, like, I need to go on a ramble about the meaning behind zombies. So 1 second. Let's just so I would say that zombies is the concept really is, and the whole point of a zombie apocalypse is this struggle for meaning. I think that the horde of zombies, like the mindless mass that kind of comes to consume at all costs, without consideration, and it spreads as the individual is consumed by this, like, this horde. the individual is constantly fighting to establish themselves as a meaningful agent to prevent the meaningless death. And the meaningless death is a walking death. It's a death that happens without dying. And I think that's what Blanchot says when he says, could we imagine the death without dying? The possibility, was it the impossibility of possibility? And he takes Heidegger and turns him on his head. And he basically establishes the idea of the meaningless being is that which is already dead, the one from which like death itself would hold no meaning. And I think that's the way I would take it. So when we say zombies are the metaphysically possible, I'd say that they already exist.
I mean, this is just one of those hard questions. I'm trying to remember exactly how it plays out. I don't want to say that zombies are inconceivable myself, because we can imagine certain types of beings like us, at least logically possible, like us, that don't have minds. I mean, that's fine. Like, you could obviously conceive of this, but I think there's a distinction between being able to conceive something and it being metaphysically possible. And that is that there would be certain types of metaphysical presuppositions such that it wouldn't allow zombies to exist whatsoever. And that is, and that would probably get into a series of arguments that right now I wouldn't be able to quite robustly defend. But because I believe in metaphysical impossibility and possibility, which is distinct from logical possibility, I would probably choose the second answer there. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm probably going to have to end this right now before I get murdered. So thanks for the conversation, Marty. And someone in my chat just said the new zombie of today is the one who cannibalizes its own brain. I think that's a good way to look at it. I think that the whole point of like its desire, like, you know, the consumption of the brain, it's very symbolic in the first place. You know, it's the consumption of the other in this like and in the attempt to consume the other, they've already lost themselves. So yeah. Anyway, I appreciate the conversation, Marty, and take it easy, and I hope you have a lovely night.
All right, thank you for having me on again, Lewis. You have a good night as well. It's been good talking to you as usual.
You too, man. Take it easy, and thanks to everyone who's watching. Bye, man.
Bye-bye.